Are there any objections to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate account of the last public business meeting? There being none, I will duly sign.
You're all very welcome to the debate tonight. The motion for this evening is that this House believes that meat is murder. Very topical. The chair for this evening is Barra Roundtree, who is the Ethical Trading Officer of the Trinity College Dublin Students' Union. He also is on the Greens National Exec and a former chair of Trinity Greens. The judging panel for this evening on everybody's left is Anne Byrne. On everybody's right, to the far right, is Ruth Fowler. To everybody's inside Anne Byrne, to the left is Jonathan Kelly. To the right, or sorry, to the left of Ruth Fowler is Catherine Murphy. To the right of Jonathan Kelly is Colin Denny. And to the left of did I say Nipu Vilon? And then finally to give the CV of our chair for this evening, Niall Sherry. Niall is an Irish Times finalist, an Irish Mace finalist, a UCD IB finalist, and a Cambridge semi-finalist. So just give the judges for this evening a round of applause. And now, while everybody is here, I'd just like to introduce all the speakers. In first proposition, we have Max Sullivan, who is a junior freshman English student. In first opposition, we have Alan Henry, who's an economics and German senior freshman student. In second proposition, we have Liam O'Neill, who's a junior freshman medicine student. In second opposition, we have Ruth Hoey, who is a junior freshman English and history student. In third proposition, we have Mairead Butler, who's a junior freshman best student. In third opposition, we have Eamon Bell, who's a music and maths student in junior freshman. In fourth proposition, we have Cara Sanquest, who is a philosophy, politics, economics and sociology student. In fourth opposition, we have Amy Worrell, who is a human health and disease student from junior freshman. In fifth proposition, we have Rian Derrick, who is a law and politics student in junior fresh. And finally, in fifth opposition, we have David Byrne, who is a junior freshman law student. So with that, I thank you all for coming, and I'm going to leave it back to the chair to enter the debate.
As you all know, this house has a proud tradition of history, and in furthering that, just like Edmund Burke at the first meeting, we'll be asking for your texts into the debate that we can read them out through the speeches. So text your name and your comments to 085 739 9995, and we'll be reading them out. And we'll call it a few times so you make sure you have the number. Without any further ado, I'll call on the first speaker, which is Max Sullivan.
Good evening, esteemed chairperson, honourable adjudicators, members of the proposition, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Max, and I'm here tonight to propose the motion that this House believes that meat is murder. The emotive term meat is murder is often associated with the animal rights movement and claims that the cruelty suffered by animals in the production of meat is fundamentally wrong. However, this motion also raises wider issues surrounding the effects of the modern meat industry on both humans and the environment. I will address the implications of the meat culture and show how it firstly shows total disregard for animals, secondly exacerbates starvation worldwide, and thirdly is a massive contributor to climate change. The modern meat industry, like every industry, is designed with efficiency in mind. Animals are given as little space as possible and as much as possible is asked of their bodies. There are varying degrees of cruelty, but even the most common practices in the meat industry are disturbing. The American farming journal, National Hog Farmer, recommends that 6 square, yes, I'm an avid reader, it recommends that 6 square feet, that's about 3 feet by 2 feet, be allowed for each pig. That's a space which does not even allow the animal to turn around in its lifetime. And why? Because, I quote, crowding pigs pays. Foie gras, the delicacy made from the fattened livers of ducks and geese, is a lovely delicacy because a funnel is shoved down the animal's throat and they are force-fed large quantities of corn. If you treat an animal like this in your own home, it is criminal. If you treat an animal like this in a factory farm, it is profitable. Just because cruelty isn't the objective on the farm doesn't make it any less morally reprehensible. The arbitrary distinction we have drawn between household and farmyard animals must be forgotten because they all suffer. However, I'm not here to solely appeal to your compassion for animals. Indeed, many people here, particularly any blow-ins from the Phil, have no compassion to speak of. Therefore, the next points I bring you are humanitarian. Despite the efficiency strived for in the meat industry, the relative efficiency of producing meat is still extremely poor. Per pound, meat requires more water and more space than any other food. And on top of that, animals must be fed large quantities of food before they themselves become food. The British organisation VegFarm estimates that a 10-acre farm is capable of supporting around 60 people growing soybean. So say if this house had a 20-acre farm at its disposal, would be able to feed most, if not all, the people here tonight.
Nice information.
I'll take you in a moment. But how many of the house could we feed on our 20-acre farm if we chose to produce cattle? 120 on soybean. How many of you on meat? 80? 60? 40? 20? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is 4. So that's me and 3 of the finest ladies of the house. But what are the rest of you going to do? I'll take you now.
The reality is, though, that meat is far more nourishing. You can talk about soya as an alternative, but
Okay, I get your point.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should live on soya alone. That's not. I'm creating a hypothetical example to display the inefficiency of producing meat. Nobody's suggesting that it's equally unhealthy to live off meat as it is to live off soybean. I'm not suggesting a staple diet of either. But food isn't your only concern. Renowned authors and ecologists Paul and Anne Ehrlich note that while it takes some 60 pounds of water to produce 1 pound of wheat, it takes between 2,500 and 6,000 pounds of water, I'll take you in a moment, to produce a pound of meat. For want of food and fresh water, people die every day. The world is increasingly resource poor, no thank you, and our insistence on producing meat, which requires so much fresh water and so much food, is hardly justifiable in a world where millions are starving to death. I'll take you now.
If you're not suggesting a staple diet of either, are you saying that some people have a right to be able to eat meat? And do you recognise that there are actually people out there who rely heavily on, produce from, cows or livestock?
I take your point. What we're saying is, we're not saying that this isn't dietary. The debate isn't dietary. We're not saying eat meat, don't eat meat. It's is meat murder. I'm not trying to challenge your right to eat meat. So I don't really think that's the issue here. And these resources I'm talking of are being put under ever-increasing pressure by the radical shifts in the planet's climate. But when I ask you to think of the causes of global warming, what do you think of? Undoubtedly, the cars you drive and the planes you travel on are coming to mind. And you're not wrong. The fossil fuels we burn in bringing ourselves around the place are a great cause for concern. But what about the steak dinner you're driving home for, or the chicken casserole you're enjoying on your connecting flight? When you purchase meat, you're contributing to demand. But to what effect? No, thank you. Pigs and chicken and cattle are slaughtered every day to supply the demand for meat. And the methane gas released by these animals makes up 18% of the greenhouse gases emitted into our atmosphere.
On that point.
Yes, no thank you. That's farts and burps and manure. All of those trains and planes and cars and the entire transport industry worldwide only contributes 13%. No thank you. Climate change already claims 300,000 lives a year, as concluded by former UN Secretary Kofi Annan's think tank, the Global Humanitarian Forum. Yes, please.
So on that point, you believe that if we stop then all production of meat, that suddenly all of these 3,000 people are going to stop dying? No, that's not the case.
How many people are you going to save?
No, sorry, I'm saying there's a problem already. We already have a problem with climate change. Are you saying just because it's already there that we should go ahead and exacerbate it? I'm saying we should get in there at ground level and we should try to, sort out the problems as they are now. Sure, 300,000 people are dying at the moment, but how many are going to die if we keep eating meat? If we keep producing meat at the rate we're producing them at the moment? Global warming, no thank you, is the greatest crisis of our time. We are already seeing more heat waves, more flooding, more tsunamis, all resulting in countless deaths and lives displaced. No thank you. Our consumption of meat is directly contributing to the crisis. Our obsession with meat is most definitely murder. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude on a more personal note. It would be a lie to say that I have eaten my last piece of meat. And while I would applaud it, I don't expect every member of the House to have turned vegetarian during the 7-minute course of my speech. But after researching the subject, I constantly run up against the real-life consequences of my diet on animals, on people, on the planet, and on our future. The motion tonight asks you, is meat murder? It most certainly is. The real question, the really tough question is, when you know the effects of our preoccupation with meat, how do you respond? I beg you to consider your lifestyle more carefully. But first, I beg you to propose.
Before I call on Alan Henry to make the first speech for the opposition, I'd remind you that there's been no text in so far, and comments will be read out periodically. Until I start getting text, I'm going to interrupt the debate after every speaker. The number is 085 739 9995. That's 085 739 9995. Text please with your name. Alan Henry.
I suddenly feel like this has turned into Irish Psychics Live. I don't know about you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to oppose the motion that meat is murder, and I'll be doing it on 2 main grounds. Firstly, I'll be arguing that we as human beings are just animals like any other, and thus are subject to the food chain. Secondly, I'll be arguing why human rights take precedent over animal rights. To my first point, this idea that we are humans and part of a wider food chain. Now, animals kill other animals all the time. It's simply part of nature. In fact, it's part of a delicate ecosystem of nature. Yes, animals kill other animals in order to extract meat, but they also do it with the indirect consequence of reducing the population of the animal that they've hunted. Now, the result of this is that you prevent explosions in population. Now, Max talked about the strain being put on the world's resources because of our dependency on meat. But if he wants to look at the real strain that would be put on resources, think of an explosion in all the animals, in the population of all the animals that we hunt now. Surely that would be far more catastrophic. No, thank you. So, let's look at this idea of the food chain and whether it is moral that we as humans buy into it, that we engage in it, and that we kill animals to hunt for meat. If you accept that, let's say, a lion can go out and hunt for its family and savage a gazelle and feed on it, then why can't humans, as omnivorous primates, engage in the exact same activity?
The point, sir.
No, thank you. Now, as Max said, we have a great amount of choice, and he talked in great detail about how soya at the moment is now produced far more efficiently. But it seems he wasn't really taking issue with the principle at hand, that is, meat is murder, but rather with the inefficiencies in the meat system. Max sounds like a businessman here, ladies and gentlemen, not an idealist. What we want to argue tonight for the opposition is that the very real choice that we are given because of our evolutionary, lineage as an omnivore is that we can both eat meat and vegetables. It is this choice that is truly our greatest strength.
No, point, sir.
No, thank you. Another reason suggested by Max is this supposed disregard for animals, this idea of suffering. And yes, we agree, suffering is a terrible thing, and we have laws to protect animals in these situations. Now, if that's the issue with tonight's debate, then we say absolutely, we shouldn't mistreat animals. We should legislate to protect animals. But should we kill animals in a sophisticated and expedient method in order to extract their meat? Why not? Absolutely.
On that point.
No, thank you. We must also remember, too, that there are humans all over the world I mean, I suppose it's hard to gain perspective in our, Teflon Western democracies here. We can't really see the other 7.5 billion people in the world who have to rely on the daily struggle of eating meat. For these people who often live in places where, not a lot of vegetation grows, or they have to eat meat because it's the only thing that provides a sufficient amount of nutrients for, their mainly agricultural lives. Yes, I'll take your point.
You may not have the perspective to see the 7 million people who you're talking about, but the fact is that these small farmers are going the way of the dinosaurs, and that they're being taken away by the trawlers and the factory farms.
Thank you. Well, I mean, let's be honest. We're part of a heavily industrializing and urbanizing world. In fact, I heard a shocking statistic the other day that every month a new Moscow or a Paris is recreated. So a lot of these people will be living in big cities, and of course they'll need far more efficient meat industries in the future in order to provide food for them. So I absolutely agree with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the results of adopting a principle that meat is murder would be truly catastrophic for the vast majority of people in the world today, because these people rely on meat. They depend on meat. It is a necessary part of the diet, as it was for our ancestors, and as it continues to be. Take, for example, the Inuit people of the Arctic Circle. These people survive mainly on seal meat. Now, what are we going to suggest to these people if we adopt such a principle that, murdering animals for meat is purely immoral? Well, what are we going to ask them to do? Eat snow cones? It's not realistic, ladies and gentlemen. So this brings me to my second point: why humans and animals cannot have the same rights, and why we have supremacy of rights as humans. Now, if you look at the idea of a right, where do they come from? Now, we have this idea of natural rights, and that's what seemingly the proposition seemed to think, that every animal has the right to live. But if you look at where rights actually come from, they come from human governments, human societies. Human governments legislate for rights. There's no naturally occurring right to live. Once I exist, there's nothing that stops me from dying. It's simply put, someone could come along and shoot me in the street in the morning if they wanted to.
Well,
no, thank you. No, thank you. So, any rights that we actually have come from our governments and are given to us by our governments. But rights are part of a two-way spectrum, if you like. On one hand, we have the rights the governments give us. That's, say, the right to life. You have the right not to be murdered. It's a very explosive term too, murder. And when we attach it to animals, we almost attach the killing of these animals with the explosive term of murder. So, I mean, it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. So why do we deserve the right to be murdered, if you like, or the right to have our killing called murder, and animals don't? Well, it's very, very simple. Because with rights come responsibilities. Yes, we have the right to life, but we also have the responsibility to uphold the lives of others. We live in a society where these responsibilities carry over on a day-to-day basis. I'll take your point in a minute. Sorry. But, so yes, we have this right, but we also have the responsibility not to go out and kill a person. That's why if a psychopath or a sociopath comes along and kills a person, we say it's a disorder. It's against the order of man. It's outside of our order. I'll take you now.
Well, this idea of rights and the reciprocity kind of them, that really bases the idea of justice on a kind of a transactive motive. We say justice is something which is inherent kind of within humanity that we extend to all. We say it isn't necessarily based on the idea of a transaction of rights.
I have your point. Yes, well, to be honest with you, I don't actually agree with that from this point of view. If you look at animals, they are, at their very starting point, at their very basic point, they don't have this concept of responsibility, this able to understand, if you like, and engage in the transactionary process. Yes, they could have the right for their killing to be called murder, but at the end of the day, would they be responsible not to go out and kill another member of society? No, because they don't have this ability to engage in the rights and responsibility relationship. We also have precedents all throughout our society of where human rights are placed over animal rights. Look at the area of animal testing, where our human rights, our human, if you like, survival and our advancement is placed ahead of the rights of animals, because we understand that is intrinsic to the betterment of our species. So, ladies and gentlemen, what have I shown you in tonight's debate? Well, firstly, I argued that we as humans are simply animals, part of a wider food chain. And it is because of the morality, or rather the naturalness of this food chain, that we should adhere to it and eat meat and hunt animals for meat. And secondly, I argued that human rights are above animal rights, or are always seen above animal rights because of the inherent nature of rights. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that in mind, I beg you to oppose.
Thank you very much, Alan. I'd ask Louise in the audience to keep her filth to herself. One comment in between the speakers. Why does Snoop Dogg need an umbrella? Faux drizzle. I now call on Liam O'Neill to run the competition.
Chairperson, adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen, and the barbarians amongst us who still think it's okay to eat meat at the expense of small, helpless animals. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to discuss this motion under 2 points that are going to not only prove to you that meat is murder, but prove to you that the opposition are sick bastards for thinking anything else. What my 2 points are going to be, I'm going to be discussing murder and the right to life, and why is it applicable to animals. And secondly, I'm going to be talking about evolutionary rights versus evolutionary responsibilities. Before I launch into that, I'd like to discuss one thing Alan brought up in his speech. And he talked about, this idea of if we stopped eating animals, there's been this big explosion of species. But the only reason that there are so many chickens, there are so many cows in the world, is because we bred them, because we've collected them on farms. And I'm sorry, Alan, humans aren't the only species who eat chickens. Anyone who was raised by Rodell's fantastic Mr. Fox would know that. So my first point, this idea of murder and the right to life. And we all know that murder is wrong, okay, because it robs people of the right to life, the right to exist. And Alan had this big spiel about how rights come with responsibilities. And the reason we have a right to life is because we also have responsibilities to other people. But this is completely, well, actually, first he said that, that rights are just things that governments come up with. No, the government didn't just wake up someday and said, sure, we'll make murder illegal. No, it's that people believe fundamentally that murder is wrong, and therefore people have a right to life. No, thank you. He then said that rights come with responsibilities, but children don't have the same amount of responsibility. They're not going to be held accountable for their actions like everyone else. And we still endow them with the right to life. Same with mentally retarded people. They don't have the capacity to fill out their responsibilities, but they still have the right to life. And nobody's going to argue with that. Yeah, go on, Amy.
Don't you think that these rights that you think children or mentally retarded people in our society have, our society collectively come together and pass on rights, transition of rights through society?
Okay, but I'm going to talk about why. Why do we endow people with this right? And the significant thing about the right to life is that we give it to anyone. We don't selectively choose people based on the colour of their skin, the contribution to society, the size of their bank account. We give it to everyone across the board. No. So there has to be some common human feature. There has to be something that connects us all. No thanks. That give us with this right. No thanks. I haven't really made my point yet. So we say it's not intelligence. It's not the greater cognitive function of the human race. Because otherwise, we could take people with Down syndrome, people from UCD, and cut them up and eat them. We're saying that there has to be something much more substantial. And what we say is that it's the ability to make decisions, to choose what you want to do. And this comes from an ability, to process pain, to process pleasure, and to be able to differentiate between the two and want one and not want the other. And this is and the humankind, our intelligence, is merely a manifestation of this. It doesn't make it any more valid or any less valid than any other pain, any other pleasure felt by any other species. And the reason that we have this right to life comes from this and stems from this. No thanks. So what we're saying is that animals have this exact same ability. So what the opposition do, and what I challenge them to do, is to show us why humans' pleasure, why humans' pain is more valid than animals, that we seem to have this hierarchical right over them, that we can put ourselves up on a pedestal and say that we can say ours is more valid, okay? And we do admit that animals do have different rights. We don't let them vote, we don't let them attend college, although many have found their way into law somehow in this country. Sorry, guys. But I'll bring up the same example. Psychiatric patients don't have complete right over their own autonomy as other human beings would. Yet we still give them the right to life. So what we're saying is that the reason we give human beings the right to life is directly transferable, no thank you, to animals. Because if you take away this idea of us being smarter, us being more intelligent, this misconstrued idea of us being more advanced, then there is nothing else to separate us. No, thank you. So if we say that every human being is entitled to the right to life, is entitled to that right that we don't, adhere kind of preconceptions to, that we don't specify who gets it, then there's no reason that we shouldn't give this to animals, and therefore murder is also applicable to animals. I'd like to move on to my second point, this idea of evolutionary rights versus evolutionary responsibilities. And the human race are the most advanced race. in terms of that we're the only race that is able to manipulate its environment around us. We're the only race that's completely independent. And Alan talked about this idea of us being part of the food chain. But the thing is that we're not part of the food chain anymore because we're so advanced. We're able to manipulate our system that we no longer have to rely on animals. And that's the significant thing about a food chain, is that no, if you're in a food chain, you're relying on killing other animals, or you're relying on other animals killing you for that cycle to continue. But humans are now in a position where we can step back. We're independent of food chains. We don't need to kill those animals. We don't have any animals hunting us.
On that point,
Yeah, go on.
would you not consider that the dangers not only come from the animals anymore, but from the earth, from diseases, from viruses, and we, as our right to life, have a right to survive to the best of our ability by eating meat to combat those threats?
But the thing is, madam, we're so advanced as a race, with technology, with science, that we can now develop healthy diets without meat. We don't need meat. No, thanks. We don't need meat to ward off these viruses that would be so tragically devastating to the human race. So what we're saying is that we're not put on top of the food chain. We're put independent of the food chain, and therefore, to quote one of the greatest films of all time, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And we do have this responsibility to other species to make sure that we don't interfere with the food chains, because we're not part of them anymore. And we can't, no thanks. We can't say that we're more advanced, therefore we have a right over these animals. We can't say that just because we're carnivores, just because we happen to evolve as omnivores, because we can eat meat, doesn't mean that we should, doesn't mean we anymore have a right to. Because yes, we were once part of the food chain. We don't have canines just for the crack of it. But the world is very different now. The human race is very different. And we have to recognize this. We have to take it in perspective and say that we've evolved not only as beings that are able to manipulate our environment, but as beings that appreciate morality, appreciate rights to life, and appreciate why these rights exist. And for those reasons, we have to not just we can't be myopic about it and say that just because they're not human beings. We can't be speciest and say that other animals, just because they're different to us, have less autonomous rights than us. We have to look across the board and say, what are we going to do? What is right for us to do? And for that reason, we in the proposition say, for peace, love, flowers, that meat is murder, and we fully reject this motion. Thank you very much.
I do not actually know where Louis' hearing aid, whoever asked that, is. Apologies, I don't know where it's gone. However, there is one good joke in so far. Well, there's another few, but how much do Hogwarts students pay for sports each year? £1 each. I now call him Ruth Hoey.
Ladies and gentlemen, important people, I'm Ruth Hoy. I'm here to talk about today two really main points. Firstly, that our consumption of meat is not murder, but it's justified. And secondly, how we cannot, as human beings, consider ourselves equal to animals because it's no good for anyone. I know they're catchy, I'm quick tonight. Okay, so I'm going to start off by, ladies and gentlemen, the first point that this meat is murder is actually justified. Because I'm going to start by comparing this to kind of a murder trial, so to speak. On the bench, or in the docks, I don't know what it's called, we have, I'm not a law student, obviously, we have meat. And the prosecution on this side saying it's murder, he did it. But we, the diligent defence, say it wasn't murder, it was self-defence. Ladies and gentlemen, unlike what the proposition of failed today to bring to us today, is that there are some aspects of murder which make it completely legitimate. If we can prove that it was a method of survival, a means by which there was nothing else, as in if someone put a gun to my head, all morals, all rights, there's no such thing as integrity, there's no such thing as dignity, no thank you. It's how can I survive to the best of my ability, and what I'm going to show to you today is our consumption of meat fits that analogy. Our world, ladies and gentlemen, is a subtle version of this scenario every day, no matter what the prosecution can bring to you. Throughout history, it has been in a physical way, when man was an animal in a food chain. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we did evolve. But you have to ask, how did we evolve? We didn't just arrive at the top of the food chain. No, it was a twofold approach. We had to destroy other animals in order to get to the top. And the other side of this destroy theory is also develop. You can't just squash smaller animals because they evolve stronger characteristics to fight you back. You have to develop yourself as a race to get stronger physically, mentally, and for your brain to get better. obviously, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, through history, how that happened, well, it wasn't soya and it wasn't corn. It was meat. It was protein on a level to feed a population. And we're not talking about lentils here, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll take your point.
Yeah, okay, when we lived in the caves and in the jungles, but we now live in a society with enough science and technology that we no longer need this, and the world isn't going to collapse just because we've got a little less protein in our diet.
No, but what it is, ladies and gentlemen, is meat is fundamentally an aspect by which we survive and how we continue to do it that day. And by putting a condition on survival, and by putting a means on how you survive, you're taking away that right to life that you talked about, because the right to life, ladies and gentlemen, is twofold. It doesn't just extend to the fact that you don't kill something. It's the fact that you've a right to life, to your own life, to survive to the best possible means that you can. And that is what, Liam, you failed to address, and it really pissed me off, actually, and I was trying to say it throughout the debate, and you did not listen to me. So, in this debate, ladies and gentlemen, we have this fight for survival to this current day. Yes, I accept that we're not Stone Age, we don't run around in butt flaps anymore, although I can't speak for half of Scotland and places like that, but what we're talking about is that we still face threats. As man evolved, the earth also evolved. Medicines, I don't get why people are saying this, but virus has become the biggest single threat facing the human race at the moment. And, no thank you, climate development, global warming, scary things like that we can't control are the new threats. And because we can't control them, it means we can't destroy them in that part of the twofold approach. No, thank you, Max. So in order to evolve currently, because man has to keep evolving, we are solely placing all that kind of need on maintaining our sustenance as a race, on developing. And by doing that, ladies and gentlemen, we have the right and we have the responsibility as a race to maintain ourselves. And if that is meat, ladies and gentlemen, oh, hang on, sit down. If that is meat, ladies and gentlemen, then so be it. We have every right to do that. Whether it's, no problem, I can predict your point. Whether it's lentils, whether it's soya, whether it's corn, that crazy protein stuff that tastes nasty. Ladies and gentlemen, it's ultimately, when you put a price on how you survive, you're putting conditions on morals, and that is not only wrong, it's dangerous. Because, to refer back to the analogy, when I'm thinking, someone's put a gun to my head, I'm not thinking, okay, how can I save myself in a way that's kind of, less harmful, less, no thank you. You're not thinking of that, you're thinking, how can I get out of this damn situation quick enough in order to survive? And that's what this debate is about, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on to my second point really quickly, which is we can't be equal with animals because it's no good to anyone. This debate ultimately relies on our interpretation of man. And if we were to consider man as an animal, we have to address the fact that other animals eat animals. And how is it moral for animals in the wild to eat each other when it's not moral for us? Well, I'm going to answer that question. It's because we are animals with reason. And that's really what this is about. We are animals in that we still live in this massive food chain, and we still do, ladies and gentlemen, and that is not Snow White in the park with Bambi and whatever. It's a battle, it's brutal, it's dominance, it's animals killing each other, no thank you, to get to the top, and that's what it's about. And ladies and gentlemen, human beings must be on the top of that food chain. And why? Because we are the only animals with reason, and when we're on the top of that food chain, we can exercise that reason. And why is that reason good? Because, no thank you, it's a reason which gives us awareness, no thank you, it's a reason which gives us kind of empathy with animals in the first place, and the ability that we can actually stand up here and talk about animals, that we care about them, and it's not for the free drink. But we're the only animal, and it's also this reason which gives us responsibility in that, okay, yes, we acknowledge that we do eat meat, and that there is going to be a certain amount of killing done, but we're going to do it in the best possible way. We're going to have population control, we're going to have sanctuaries, we're going to do it in a way that's humane. We are the only creatures on this planet who can think like that. There are no other creatures, no thank you, in the animal kingdom with that capability and that intelligence to exercise responsibility as a concept, no thank you. And it's also, reason is what also gives us control, ladies and gentlemen, ultimately. And the thing is that we can only exercise that reason if we're on the top of the hierarchy, because otherwise, because reason is something intangible, it's not physical, it doesn't help us physically in terms of that survival instinct, in terms of crawling to the top. You don't think of reason, there is no thing about, whether it's right or wrong, it's just get there. But when we're on the top, we can exercise it. And it's only through meat and through the food chain and through evolution and through the consumption of meat and yes, the killing of animals, that we can get to the top. But ladies and gentlemen, this whole evolution process, this whole food chain is not a walk in the park. It's not a nice little picture. The world is a dog-eat-dog world, and the reason we call it that is because dogs eat dogs, I guess, and animals eat animals. But when you have humans on top, we can make it the best possible way for everybody. We can exercise responsibility, we can exercise control, and we can make it as humane as possible. And we're talking about ultimately protecting our life and protecting and improving the lives of the people below us on the food chain, on the other levels. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is life. It's about survival, not murder. And with that, I beg you to oppose.
I have submitted none of these jokes. From Matthew, what do you call a lazy general practitioner? Dr. Doolittle. Shame, Matthew, shame. I now call him Ray Butler to continue the case for the proposition.
Adjudicator, timekeeper, members of the proposition, opposition, fellow debaters and friends. My name is Ray Butler, and as a member of the proposition, what I'm here today to try and do is convince you that meat is indeed murder. Okay, quite frankly, I don't think any of you have been subjected to enough horror stories as it stands this morning, so I'm going to go into further detail on why exactly meat is murder. Okay, when I say meat to you all, what is conjured up in your head? Most likely a filthy fry-up on a Friday, a sizzling steak on a Saturday, and then not really that likely that you're thinking of an animal being dragged screaming and crying before its guts are ripped out. Now, I'm not trying to be too graphic here, ladies and gentlemen, but we need to understand that meat is indeed murder. And what I'm trying to explain to you is that in our society, there are ridiculously conflicting views towards animals. Now, if you think of perhaps taking your child to a zoo where they observe a pig and pat it on the head and look at its cute tail, and then you serve it up to them 2 hours later and they're thinking, yeah, that tastes good. Now, what we're saying is this is completely wrong, and meat is indeed murder. The cruelty that these animals suffer is absolutely unbelievable. In research of this debate, I came across some things that literally would make all of you bend over and get sick. No, thank you. So I'm just going to go into a few of them. For example, chickens are kept in these little pens, dislocating all of their bones, and artificial lights flash at them 24/7 just to make sure they pop out as many eggs as possible. Calves are put in a box so they don't develop any muscle, and are then served up as veal. And this is quite horrifying. No, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But pigs are actually castrated, not using any anaesthetic. Now, I promise I'm not going to horrify you any further. But the point here, ladies and gentlemen, is what is going on in this day and age is completely inhumane. And I know we've heard from this proposition. What we're actually going to do is make it more humane. And we're accepting this meat is murder, but it's going to be no, thank you. No, McDonald's or Burger King are just going to be like, yeah, sure, and then throw another 25 million pigs back into pen. No, thank you. And if you think of your pet, for example, okay, you think of your little fluffy dog, your little fluffy rabbit that you brush, you take for a walk, and you put it in the bath. Then imagine someone took it, ripped its skin off, put it in a frying pan, and gave it to you for dinner. No, thank you. And no thanks. And I know what you're saying. No, it's completely different. We're saying, actually, no, it isn't. Like, if it just so happened that you kept a pig in your house, everybody loved Bay Pig in the city. I mean, you'd feel exactly the same. And that point that I'm really the point that I'm finally trying to stress here is that pigs, animals, cows, they all have personalities, they have emotions, and they feel the pain. No, thank you. And that is why that it is murder, okay? So now, go ahead, right, we'll just go.
I have a feeling that you might have been looking at some bestiality websites instead of the animal welfare laws that already do exist to protect the animals that are being used for production.
Okay, well, sorry, if you came onto that PETA website, they are most definitely not working. You see the pregnant cow hanging upside down with blood dripping out. The animal laws are not enough, and meat most definitely is murder, okay? And now we bring on this point, do we have the right to do this then? Are we so superior that we have the right to this? And obviously, being on the proposition, I'm going to say, no, we don't. Okay, and we've had this idea, animals are inferior, animals aren't as smart as us, animals can't communicate, animals can't rationalise. And I say, well, neither can a baby. I'm not going to cut that up. No, thank you. Now, I'm not trying to say that an animal is exactly the same as a baby. But the point that I'm trying to get across here is that we champion ourselves as the defenders of the weak and the defenceless and the vulnerable in our society. So surely animals, weak, defenceless animals, are vulnerable in society. No, thank you. And what we actually do is we take them, we torture them for their entire lives, and then we eat them. No, thank you. Which we're saying is, no, that isn't okay. That's not fair. And meat is murder and should not be done. And then we have this kind of idea that it's our natural instinct and it's always been done. And we all need to get our hands on a bloody burger because that's a natural way of things. Well, when we went back to before BC, if a caveman set his eyes on a good-looking woman, he'd give her a good time, whether she wanted it or not. So now in our society that day, we say that isn't okay. And you're not able to just obey your natural instinct because we've actually has been brought up by the opposition that we are at the top of the food chain. We've killed everything in our sights to get here. So now that we're here, let's just stop. Let's just stop killing all the animals. And then we also have we also have this idea that without meat, we are all going to die. Every single person in this room, flat down, dead by the end of the week without meat. And what we on the proposition are saying, that is not true. No, thank you. Vegetarians exist all around us, and I'm pretty sure they're not dying. Okay, I will concede that human life is more valuable than animal life. But, no thank you, but we are not killing any humans by taking meat away from them. Because the fact of the matter is, we can clearly survive on vegetables. Right. Thank you. The three longest surviving Native American tribes lived as vegetarians. The Eskimos are dropping like flies because they can't get their hands on vegetables. So the point here that we will die without meat is completely untrue. And we also, we also had this whole point about, animals kill other animals. So then that's okay, so that means we can kill them. But it's not, because I'm sure that if animals could drive tractors and sow fields and grow vegetables, then they would. But they can't, because they don't have hands. So what we're saying is, now that we're at the top of the vegetable food chain, let's demonstrate our rationale, let's demonstrate what we can do, and sow the vegetables, sow the fields. So what I have tried to bring to the table today is that, yes, indeed, meat is murder. And why is this? Because they go through an unbelievable amount of cruelty that you would never subject your little puppy to or your little rabbit to, and this is what happens. So yes, it is indeed murder. And do we have the right to do this? No, we don't. As humans who are able to rationalise, who are at the top of the food chain, who are so highly intelligent, then we should be setting an example and not slaughtering all our livestock. Because the fact of the matter, despite what the opposition keeps saying, is we can and have and will be able to survive on vegetables. And if you don't believe me in this, then consider the opinions of Leonardo da Vinci, Gandhi, or Einstein, and they also will beg you to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. We've intercepted a text meant for Joe Duffy. It reads, "Forget meat. Pat Kenny's on 14 grand a week. That's injustice." I'd like to now call on Eamon Bell to continue the case for the opposition.
Mr. Auditor, ladies and gentlemen of the College Historical Society, I am no chicken. I'm not afraid to talk about these issues. I'm not afraid to challenge their definition of rights, and that's what I'm first of all going to talk about. I'm going to talk about why animal rights and why animal welfare are two different things, and why this idea of cruelty and why it's a cruel thing to inflict this sort of punishment on animals doesn't fall under the right structure. It falls under a structure of welfare, and I'll argue why the industrialised process of meat is not in itself cruel. Secondly, I want to talk about why we grant rights to people, and we accept, the government doesn't just grant rights, and that was mentioned, but also society grants rights, and we say how society and the government grants rights and what criteria they grant rights to people on, and how animals do not fulfill most of these criteria. And finally, that this motion portrays a very, very negative image in that it projects some sort of human characterization onto patently non-human objects, and why this is a waste of time. And this is particularly prominent in Ray's speech. Okay, first of all, the difference between animal rights and animal welfare. I say there's a difference, and I say there's a difference because I talk about, I'm going to offer this up as a definition of welfare. I'm going to say that welfare is something that we use to protect humanity from itself, okay? We outlaw things like cruel treatment of animals in the home because it is an expression of our sadism, and we want to stop people from running around like sadists and abusing animals. And that's fine, and I accept that's fine. No, thank you. Okay? Now, no, thanks. Look, when we have meat, we take it out of the home, and we accept. You say that there was an analogy made that if we were doing this in the home, then it'd be awful. So when we do it in a slaughterhouse, it's somehow equally awful. But it's not. It's away from society. It's in a place where the people at the top are motivated by profit. So. No thanks. And I think profit is a good. No, thank you. I seriously think that profit is a good motivation there here because it avoids the people doing it for the sheer LOL of it. No, thank you. Okay. Now the thing is. Welfare, yeah, we spoke about welfare and we spoke about the thing. And look, the cruelty that exists, we spoke about this stuff on the internet, and it's pretty disgusting, and there's actually fairly hilarious, but it's also fairly disgusting. There's, of course, a Supreme Court case in the US, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about, basically, it hinged on whether videos of females with high heels crushing animals was a good thing. And it's not, of course it's not. But the point is, we are not doing that. We are taking the humanity away from killing animals and we're putting it into a place where it's okay, where it's acceptable. No thanks. Okay, now I want to talk about why we grant rights. I want to talk about why the idea of murder is a rights-based proposal, and because we liken it to murder, we liken it to something that we hold very dear to ourselves. I'm going to say, why do we grant rights? Okay, we said we don't. We give rights because we expect some sort of thing in return, and we said, well then. Why do we give rights to disabled people? Why do we give rights to children? Okay, well, I want to do the thing about children first. The reason we give rights to children is because we recognize their potential to contribute at some later stage. And because by giving rights, we offer them an environment that they can flourish in. We offer them an environment where they can fulfill their potential to contribute to society. Animals have no potential to contribute to society outside of their human connections. And I'll actually take it.
Well, I would argue that they do in the natural cycle of life outside of human connections. If we keep them bound up in factory farms and continue breeding them for our own uses, how are we letting the natural course of events run?
Well, I think we've accepted that the natural course of events isn't a good thing because we've had to claw our way back up to the top of the food chain, and nobody wants to displace us from the top of the food chain. So I say to you that the natural order of things is not necessarily the best way to let things happen. No, thank you, and we accept that because we talked about Randy cavemen. No, thanks. Okay. Second reason, why do we grant rights? Because we grant rights because we want to temper our emotions, and I think this is a really important aspect of granting rights. An example of this is the right that we commonly hold in this Western democracies of due process, because we say that when a criminal goes up, their acts are so repellent that we might actually come into ourselves and we might actually lynch this guy. But we say no, we give them a right to a fair trial because we recognise that we want to temper our emotions. Now, the problem with this proposal is that it's solely based on emotions. Yes, I'll take it.
Why not temper our emotions towards animals? Why not temper our murderous emotions towards animals?
Okay, I don't think our emotions towards animals are strictly murderous. I don't think anybody here gets any pleasure out of murdering an animal. I don't think anybody here likes to see animals being killed, but they do like steak. They do like their burgers, and they do like their fries on Friday morning. And okay, is that a good thing? It's not. No. Okay. Maybe. Yes. Okay. Fine. It might not be a good thing. Okay. We accept that there is, and we've spoken about the risks. We've also spoken about how Inuits are dropping like flies, and what's the solution there? Are we going to give them soya? Are we going to fly that up to them in their flipping carbon-heavy, express class jumbo jets that you talked about? That was crazy. But basically, we accept that we can't really put a rights-based proposal. We can't accept that the premise is that they have some sort of inalienable right to life. And now finally, I want to talk about why it's a bad thing to project human characteristics onto things that are painfully not human. Okay, this is what I call the man in the moon syndrome, because when we look up at the when we look up at the moon, we see a face and we say, well, okay, there's no man on the moon, but we're so pathetic as human beings. We're so sad that we want people to be up there. We want to have connections with other people. And when we get a pet animal, we want to connect with them. And that's sad. And I know lots of people are going to get up and say, well, he obviously didn't have a dog. And you're right, I didn't have a dog. able to see past my personal experience with my fluffy bunny and say, right, this is happening. I accept that people who are doing it are not, don't have a bad intention. I accept that they're doing it in, hopefully a humane way. But even if it's not in a particularly humane way, it's not that bad because we don't afford the same rights to them. I don't expect people to be tortured on the street, but I can expect animals to be subject to some form of cruelty. And I know it sounds hard to swallow, but the point is, we can't empathise with animals. And I think the crucial thing about the emotional understanding, at least, is that we can have some sort of empathy with animals, that we can feel their pain in some sense. We cannot feel their pain because we have not developed, I suppose, either sophisticated mind-reading techniques, because it seems to be the theme of the night, actually, is mind-reading. We haven't developed those techniques. We can't successfully empathise with these animals on a level that would cause them on a level that would allow some sort of meaningful understanding when it comes to a rights-based approach to solving this problem. So what have I talked about? I said animals fail to meet these certain criteria, these strict criteria for granting rights because they can't contribute to society. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but I don't really feel bad about it. Thank you very much, and I beg you to oppose.
Express disappointment at the lack of good jokes coming in at the moment. A reminder, and we'll incentivise you with a prize and a free pint and lilies afterwards, that the best joke to 085 739 9995 will get a prize. I now call on Cara Sandquist to continue the case for
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're all a little bit confused. Let's go back to the word murder. So we on the proposition are going to take murder to be an illegitimate killing with intent. So let's look at what the opposition is saying tonight. They're saying that the killing of animals is legitimate if it's not murder. So I think that something can be legitimate if it's founded in two main things. Number one, that if we have a need to do something, it's legitimate. And number two, that if we have a right to do something, it's legitimate. So I think all of the proposition speakers have already addressed the fact that we don't have a need to kill animals. Because of technological advancements, we've kind of outgrown the need to rely on meat as our main kind of nutritional factor, and that if we stop eating meat, the world isn't going to fall apart. And even if we do admit that meat is murder, what we're doing at the moment is producing far beyond what we need. We're not looking at meat as a necessity, we're looking at it as a luxury, and that's what we need to address today. So the second thing that opposition are talking about is rights, that we have a right to eat meat. So I'm going to talk about that in my speech on two main grounds. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the distinction between animals and humans and how this isn't ground for discrimination and for ignoring animal rights. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how I believe our moral judgment is clouded by our desire to eat meat. Now, first of all, the opposition have been saying that killing animals is not murder because we don't need to recognise their rights. We don't have any responsibility towards animals and towards their right to life. No thanks, I haven't even started. So we're saying that the difference between, you're saying that animals are rational, or humans are rational, animals are not rational, therefore we have a right to exercise power over them. We have a right to kill animals. We have a right to make animals suffer. And Max already, and all the other, have already showed you all the examples of how we make animals suffer. And killing animals is making them suffer, no matter if you do it in humane circumstance or not. So we're saying that that just because we are more important beings in our minds, we as meat eaters have the right to kill animals. We don't have any kind of moral obligation to animals just because we differentiate us and them. But I don't think this is a solid foundation for such a morally charged issue as life and death. No, thank you. The taking of a life unnecessarily,
You just stated that we have no moral obligation to animals, but you're insisting that we morally give our own responsibilities and give them moral rights.
No, I didn't say. I'm saying you're assuming we don't have a moral obligation. I'm saying that we need to step back and we need to look at the bigger picture, and we need to say, do we really have a moral obligation to respect animal rights? Do we? And you're saying that we don't, and I'm saying that we do, and we need to look at why we do and where this kind of value judgment comes from. So we've done this before, ladies and gentlemen. Our society has undergone like an evolution of understanding. We've come to realise that mankind isn't in fact at the centre of the universe. Physically, we're not at the centre of the physical universe. We used to think the sun revolved around the earth. We realise that isn't true. Internally, we've also come to these kind of epiphanies. We've realised that man has made errors in judgments. We've realised that man makes mistakes. before there was this kind of idea of societal hierarchy, and it was okay to discriminate against different people based on issues such as class and race and all these kind of things. And we've realized that this isn't right. These kind of hierarchical notions have been dispelled, and we need to extend this idea to animals, because the only thing standing between us and animals, as the opposition have said, is rationality, responsibility, intelligence. No, thank you. And these are the barriers which we're using to distance ourselves from our moral obligation. But I don't think this barrier is right, yeah?
But don't you think that the fact that they don't have rationality, all these different things, means the fact that when we kill a chicken and it doesn't care about the fact that it's going to die and it has no emotions, or people that care that it is dead?
No. I think the fact that we are more rational gives us more responsibility. As somebody already mentioned, Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility, with whatever Spider-Man said. The fact that we're more rational means that just as we do in our human society, we need to protect the weaker members of society. We need to respect the fact that even though these animals can't engage with us and can't protect themselves, that doesn't give us the God-given right to go killing them just for our luxury, and it is a luxury, not a need. And I think this belief kind of comes from the idea of the social contract. The opposition have talked a lot about the two-way thing of rights and responsibilities, that just because animals don't offer us any rights, that means we don't have to give them any rights. Just because they don't have any responsibilities in society, we don't owe them anything. But I think this is fundamentally wrong. And I think we need to step back. No, thank you. I think that we need to take animals more so into our moral considerations, and we can't ignore them just because they fall outside our human society. So morally, I think we can all agree that it's wrong to take a life unnecessarily. And just because, so if we look at justice, if something is in line with the social contract, then it's just. If something is not in line with the social contract, then it's unjust. So the opposition is saying that just because the murder of an animal does not conflict with the social contract, does not conflict with justice, and does not conflict with the rights which the government give us, that it's unjust, that it's the killing of animals is just. And yes, I would say that it's just. It is in line with our social contract, but we need to step back from this, and we need to look at something bigger, which is morality. Because let's not forget that justice is just a tool to bring us to our ultimate goal, which is morality. Morality is the end, and justice is just a means to bring us to this end. So to answer a question of real legitimacy, when we're really asking what is right and what is wrong in the world, we need to step back and we need to look at the bigger picture, which is morality. And we need to prioritize the fact that life is good and taking innocent life is bad over our ideas of justice. No, thank you. Secondly, I'm going to propose the idea of kind of what brings us to carry out animal killings. I think it's a combination of two things. I think it's desire and belief. I think that we kill animals for meat because A, we want meat, and B, we believe that we have a right to kill animals for our own selves, and we don't have any kind of moral obligations. One of the opposition already said that no one likes to see an animal killed, but we all like to eat steak. And I think this is exactly what we as a society are doing when we eat meat, because we're being guided largely by desire, not by our own moral judgments. The fact that we want to eat meat, that we enjoy meat, and we like meat is guiding us and preventing us from listening to our own moral compass. What we as a society and as a human community have come to realize through making laws to protect animals is that it's not okay to make animals suffer for our benefit, that animals have a right to life just as much as we do, and that animals need to be protected from suffering, and that humans can't just treat animals however we want. And I think we need to extend this understanding and apply it to how we eat meat. It's not okay for someone who eats a steak to be really enjoying their steak and at the same time agree that abusing animals is wrong. The two things don't match up at all. And we need to reconcile this understanding that we have in some capacity that harming animals for our own benefit is wrong and apply it to the way which you're looking at meat. On those two grounds, I beg to propose.
Before calling on Amy Worrell to continue the case for the opposition, a quick text. A man sent in 10 puns into a pun competition, hoping no one would win. Unfortunately, no pun intended. We continue with Amy. We now call on Amy Worrell to continue the case for the opposition.
Honourable Chair, adjudicators, timekeeper, proposition, fellow opposition, ladies and gentlemen of the College Historical Society, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Amy Worrell, and I'm here this evening to set your minds right as to why it is not murder to eat meat, use meat, or produce meat for the human population. Before I start, I would like to explain how I interpret the motion. Because, ladies and gentlemen, murder is a very big word. It has a lot of insinuations that come with it, and it was defined by Cara as the illegitimate killing with intent. Now, Oxford says something else. Lawfully, the Oxford Dictionary describes it as the killing of another human being under stately law, but that doesn't qualify with this motion. So morally, murder is actually the slaughtering inhumanely or barbarously. Now, this puts a different spin on this, ladies and gentlemen, because as it stands in the world in which we reside, there are in fact animal welfare laws out there already existing that do not condone that do not condone the inhumane killing or slaughtering of animals for human food production. And as a result, I would expect that all farming-related and animal-related productions would adhere to these, and that is just a problem within the mechanism of how the meat production works in our world. It does not give a proper principled ground to stop eating meat. My second point, ladies and gentlemen, is that I'm actually not here to dispute whether animals are cognitive thinkers or feelers, nor am I here to debate whether their innate little being is a fuzzy-wuzzy creature. No, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to argue that it is fair in the world in which we reside at the moment to use animals for our own survival. I have three major points to present to you, and then a bit of rebuttal at the end. Firstly, I'd like to stress the importance of the natural order. Secondly, I'd like to argue with regards to what seems to be perceived as animal rights in the debate. And then I'd like to go on with regards to how we have evolved to eat meat, and cruelty is not inclusive in the process of the meat production. So, with regards to the natural order, the natural order in life shows us that it is perfectly natural to use animals for survival as a nutritious source of meat. Yum. And in the wild, there is, of course, much suffering. Animals struggle to survive. But humans being extremely successful, we've climbed out of slimy slugs from the sea and have evolved to the beautiful creatures that we are now. And the proposition, no thank you, Max, the proposition are making us almost feel ashamed as to our exploiting of our position as a successful species in the evolutionary process.
On that point, madam.
Oh, yes. Eeny, meeny, money, mo.
You speak about the natural order as if we're still going out and clubbing animals in the wild, but the fact is that we have disobeyed the natural order by taking in such a large amount of animals and breeding them.
I actually don't think so. I think if you look at the evolutionary process, farming has just become a method by which we have evolved. We are simply using it, and we still are, in fact, part of the food chain because we are participating in eating other members within a food chain. So, of course, we are participating in evolutionary process. Now, on to my main point, which is that human beings who are members of society have rights. They're not endowed to us by the government. The government is simply a body that our society set up. We as a community, as a society of human beings, invented rights. And rights come with social duty and moral responsibilities. Now, the problem is, animals are not capable of entering into this social contract. The social contract of you get a right, little dog, and you have a responsibility with this. It's like saying you can vote. But of course, you should probably vote. Just because you're allowed to, you should also practice that. Now, dogs and animals and just cows, pigs, whatever we're talking about, livestock in general, don't necessarily understand this social contract. And they simply cannot be given personal rights. However, I do believe, as a member of the opposition, that there is room in our extremely developed society to give humans who are in place of care of animals some sense of responsibility over the animals they look after. And as a result, we must realise, ladies and gentlemen, that humans have developed, no thank you, even enough to extend our own responsibilities to the welfare of animals. We should not feel pressured by the proposition to admit a wrongdoing that on our behalf, when the reality is that we have done more for animals than nature actually demands of us. Moving on to my third point, ladies and gentlemen.
If you can recognise that it's correct to give certain animals rights and respect their welfare, then can you not apply that rule to the many? And say
But
that
we do. I mean, you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that we are not out to force any animal into extinction, bar maybe the Russians and the minxes. We, as a general populace, do not want any species to become extinct, so we control them. We have that hierarchy, I suppose, because we are the most advanced. We do care about animals. There are laws in place. People do adhere to them. So, moving on to my third point, which is that eating meat does not mean cruelty to meat, ladies and gentlemen. There is a growing number of organic and free-range farms that provide meat without cruelty to animals. Legally, to have anything named as free-range or organic, you have to have 6 acres per cow. Yeah, okay, go on. Oh, wait. Are they in order? Yeah, go on.
Do you not think that this understanding that we're showing that animal welfare is important needs to be extended to the point where we understand that making animals suffer, just killing them just for our luxury, is also wrong?
No, I actually don't. I think that by giving them an extremely well-cared life where they are fed, they have nutrition, they have everything they require, is as much as humans need to go. We don't have to give them any rights. You never justified why we must give them rights. We do give them rights out of our own, the goodness of our heart, and the rationale that we have developed over the evolutionary process. And as a result, I don't think that we are required by any stretch of the imagination to give, you're out of order, to give animals any form of rights. However, because it may be reasonable to argue that an extension of animal welfare laws to protect more farm animals, but that does not mean that it is wrong in principle to eat meat. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, meat is good for humans. I've argued this on several points. The natural order has taught us to eat meat. Animal rights are not a legitimate argument. We're biologically programmed to require meat. And I'm not condoning barbarous killing or unnecessary torture of animals, ladies and gentlemen. In perspective, I'm calling for the rationale of your minds to trust your instincts and simply go with the flow and the evolution and just eat some meat.
Thank you, Amy, for your words. A quick one in from Barry. What do you call a grizzly bear covered in cheese? A camembert. I now call upon the final speaker for the proposition competing from the Maidens, Rian Derry.
So we're smart. What rights does that endow us with? Now, I know I might be speaking to the wrong audience here, but just because we're smarter than other people, it doesn't automatically endow us with certain rights. If anything, it endows us with certain responsibilities. It endows us with the responsibility to consider the welfare of other beings. It endows us with the responsibility to use our reason, to use that reason that's been talked about so much by the opposition here, to use that reason to appreciate, the sentience of other beings, the welfare of other beings, and to exercise that. What the opposition have to do here today is they need to draw a distinction, and it's something they've kind of failed to do. They've flirted around it. Reason was toyed with, but they didn't say, this is the distinction. This is why we are saying animals can be killed and humans cannot. Basically what they're saying is, it's speciesism, guys. They're not humans. It's fine. End of. Now, I think there's a thing in debating called assertions, where you have to back that up. There's a reason why I can't say, okay, they're not Caucasian, let's kill them all. They're not male, let's kill them all. Oh yeah, I have to justify it. So I'm going to hope Dave is going to fulfill that for the opposition, because that's a serious problem for their case, and it's something they want to work on. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at what I see as being the 3 main areas where we've clashed throughout the debate. First of all, I'm going to look at this idea of distinction. I'm going to talk about some of the distinctions that have been toyed with and why we see problems there, why they cannot be justified. And that's going to lead on to the second point of the justification of it, why they can't be justified, and if you want to think of it, kind of the morality of it. And then finally, I'm going to slightly more briefly, because I think it's pretty mainstream shit, guys. Walk into any health food shop and they'll tell you, I'm going to talk about the net benefit of eating meat and why it's not actually necessary. I know the opposition are going to be surprised by that, but anyway. Okay, first of all, this idea of distinction. So the first way we can draw a distinction it was raised by the opposition, is that, oh, they don't have the ability to pursue their kind of preferences. In a sense, they don't have an autonomy. Well, we say they do. Animals do have an ability to pursue their preferences. If a dog likes a bone, he has an ability to go and find one. We say animals do have an ability to pursue their preferences. Therefore, the life they are capable of, while to a degree less than the life we as humans are capable of, is still influenced by their actions. It's still influenced by their preferences. You can't just draw the line there. And that raises the idea of what about, and I think the opposition promised they'd tell us about this, Eamon might have, but he didn't. The idea of mentally enfeebled humans. What about them? What about senile humans? The life they're capable of. What about handicapped people? The life they're capable of, by virtue of their bad luck in the genetic lottery, is an awful lot, is really diminished in comparison to the life we are capable of, because purely on the basis of luck, in the same way, just because we are lucky, we are a member of the species of Homo sapiens. It's the same thing. It might sound a bit out there, but in reality, you cannot just draw that distinction. Secondly, that's the idea, of long-term planning. And then there is this idea that, well, if they can't plan into the future, if an animal can't appreciate what's coming down the line, then there isn't any real loss when we kill them, because they can't appreciate it. We say no. We say, again, we raise the idea of people who don't appreciate this. And it was raised already, people like mentally retarded people who can't understand very often what is harmful to them. And they don't understand what's coming in the future, but yet we extend these rights to them. And we see, you can't just say, oh, well, they're human, and they're animals. No, we're all animals. The same rights extend to us all. Any other boundary, really what we're saying here, is any other boundary is arbitrary. The only boundary we can use is sentience. And we say sentience is the ability to enjoy and to suffer, to enjoy happiness. We say animals can do that. And we're not going to be shy about saying that. We say yes, unequivocally, they can do that. That's why we're not defending things like deep ecology here. That's why we're not saying, so many billion carrots are murdered every year, because they're not sentient beings. Secondly, this idea of justification, and this ties into morality as well. What we're actually doing here, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it down to earth. What we're doing is we're sacrificing the most basic, the most fundamental needs of one being to satisfy the most trivial needs of ours. I love this rhetoric of, oh, well, we're on top of the world, we're the human race, and we need to eat meat to sustain that. We need our steak. No, we don't. There are alternatives. And what we are doing, the reality, we eat meat because we like steak, because we like the taste of it. That's the only reason we eat meat. It's a historical precedent. And we say at some stage in the history, it may or may not have been relevant. It may or may not have been important. We say we've reached the stage now where we can make that choice. We can replace meat with stuff like diet supplements, but also with stuff like things like soya and corn. And saying soya and corn sneeringly doesn't make them any less of a viable option. Then there's this idea of wrongs, and it was kind of raised. The idea that, well, if they can't perceive the fact that a wrong is done to them, therefore no wrong has been done. We say no, that doesn't stand up. Again, I hate coming back to it, but there is the idea of humans who are less kind of capable of understanding things than us. We say, a wrong is committed, and we say animals are capable of understanding that, they're going to die. We say if you drag, I don't know if anyone's seen, a cow or a bullock being dragged into a slaughterhouse, but they can smell the blood. They can smell the fear in the air. Likewise with the dog that's been sent into a pit to face a pit bull. They smell the blood in the air. They know what's coming. You cannot say animals do not appreciate death. I'll take you in a moment. You cannot say animals do not appreciate this any more than you cannot say we do not appreciate that. Yeah,
We're not saying that. We're saying that the distinctive factor between animals and humans is that if animals were on top of the hierarchy, they would have no regard for the lower classes, unlike us.
Okay, so just because they do it, we shouldn't do it. And we'd, first of all, for animals to be on top of the hierarchy, they'd probably have to have the reason that we have. They'd probably be having this debate right here. I might be something like, I don't know, a fox or something. And I might be saying, come on guys, give the humans a break. They've got rights too. Okay. Then, briefly, I think it's very important to deal with this idea of reciprocity. Eamon raised it, and on the surface, it's a very good point. You say, societies can't contribute, with rights come responsibilities, the famous phrase, everyone loves that. We say, no, that doesn't stand up. You just can't they say, you can't just grant rights. We say it depends what theory of justice you ascribe to. We ascribe to a theory of justice that isn't based on the fear of injustice being due to yourself. If you censure injustice because you fear just injustice being committed against you, because you're out of fear, we say that's not a valid theory of justice. We say we establish justice because of something inherent within our humanity, because we think it is important, because we think we should extend it to all. Purely on that basis. I don't have to justify it any more than that. That's what justice is. It's not a transactive thing, and it doesn't have to be, especially in the case of fundamental rights like the right to life. Briefly, the net benefit. Surprise, surprise, eating meat is a choice. You don't need to eat meat. There are alternatives. There are things like soya, there are things like diet supplements, there are things like zinc, all this stuff. Then the idea of economics. I don't know, something like, 1 acre yields 10 times more protein if you cultivate it with crops than you do meat. So there's the statistic. That's a good one. Finally, just to conclude, Jeremy Bentham, he posed this quite well when he said the question is not can they reason, nor even can they talk, but can they suffer? Now, on this side of the house here, tonight we say yes. We say yes, they can. We beg you to propose, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so chairperson, adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen, what would a chicken in a battery farm say if you asked it what it thought about the fact that it was going to go off, be slaughtered, and be your dinner? Well, actually, that's a trick question because, guys, it's just a fucking chicken. What I'm going to do at the end of this debate is look at the two key questions that have emerged coming to end. So, firstly, do we as human beings have a right to eat meat? I'm going to say yes, we do. Secondly, do the practicalities of the meat industry and the consequences of its existence render it morally unacceptable? I'm going to say no, it doesn't. So firstly, I'll get into it. Do we have a right to eat meat? I say yes, we do. I put it to Max at the start of the debate that there are people out there to whom meat is a necessity or to whom meat is simply important. Shouldn't they be allowed to have it, to choose it? And Max's answer was, well, this isn't a dietary debate. I'm not talking about whether people should be allowed to eat meat. Now, luckily for the debate, his teammates did say that there is no right to eat meat. But in any case, this is, in many ways, a dietary debate. The question is, should I be allowed to, and do I have some kind of need to, as a person, have dead animals in my diet? And we say yes to both of these questions. Now, Rian and Liam both told you that there's some kind of natural right to life, that everyone and every single being, so long as it seems to exist, shares some kind of common feature that they never really elaborated upon. That means that everything out there has a right to life. We don't think there is such thing as a natural, infallible right like that. We say that, in fact, these rights come from a consensus on the part of society where people came together and said, hey, look, I don't want to die. That scares me. Let's all agree about this. Let's establish a right to life. And as far as, Rian kept harping on about the disabled people, firstly, we'd say it's kind of an insulting assumption to say that they have no idea what life is, or that they might not want to die, or they don't have those kind of emotions. Second of all, we say that society gets together and says, let's protect these people. We believe in their right to life. We think that it's society's place, it's for us as people to stand up and to say, we believe that we have a right to life and that other people don't. We think that there are no such things, no thank you, as rights which just so happen to exist because, they came along with the Big Bang. We think things change and evolve in terms of rights. That's why we have gay rights in the 20th, 21st century that we never saw before, because society changes, comes together, and says what rights exist. We say the right to life in this case came about this way, and there is no natural, it just so happens to exist, convenient for this proposition, right to life on the parts of animals. No, thank you. We think that Furthermore, society has also decided that the simple thing, one being killing another, isn't always murder. We say society has got together and accepted soldiers killing each other, people defending themselves. And we don't say that one being killing another is always murder. It's not good enough to assert that because there are right to animals, which you say exist since the passage of time, and then say that because it's one being killing another, it's murder. We say animals in their existence live in a cycle whereby they are threatened, or they're either going to be eaten or going to consume another animal. We say that in terms of this sense, they do live in a world whereby the reality is that they may or may not be eaten. We don't think they have a right to stand up and say, no, we don't. We think if they were so sentient and clever, as these guys seem to be saying they would, then they'd get together and form some kind of union and make a court and decide in that animal court that they wanted the right to life. But since they haven't, then we've been given the idea of, no thank you, oh, what about the humanity of it, guys? We're really intelligent, so we've got to respect animals more. I say, yeah, we are intelligent, we are civilized, we have come a long way. That doesn't necessarily mean that we now have to be vegetarians. The assumption that intelligent beings can't be kind of kick-ass is one that they've established all along this side of the house. I think that because we're civilized and intelligent enough to decide as a community that we're going to eat animals, that's something we should be allowed and left to do, because we are actually the superior race out here. We are natural omnivores, and we can endorse that. We have the barbecues to do it, ladies and gentlemen. We say just because we're intelligent doesn't mean we have to automatically impart some kind of rationale that we have onto animals. And Mairead brought up the interesting idea of, oh, don't they have personalities? But that's just it. They don't. That's what happens when a sentient being who wants to convince themselves that it's okay, they don't have any actual friends, gives a personality to an animal, because we're clever beings that are capable of doing this. An animal which isn't going to notice it, which isn't going to care, which has no concept of right or wrong. That's what this proposition is doing on a larger level. It's attributing features to animals that they never had before, as they would humans. We say it's completely arbitrary. We have a right to come together to make the choice on animal rights and to decide that we want to eat meat. Go.
I really hate to have to make this point, but what about the loyalty of something like a pet dog? What about the fact that animals do become attached to humans? You can't just say it's
Who
so,
cares?
and
We
then
say the
keep
fact that a
everyone
dog
losing.
appreciates the fact that you give it dinner every day doesn't mean that it necessarily has a personality. It has a concept of life. It's going to miss you when it dies. We say it doesn't have the same kind of personality. It isn't the same kind of sentient being. And in any case, we are the top dog out here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to decide whether or not they have the right here. We as civilized, intelligent beings are capable of making that decision. We don't always say that a death is a murder, and we think we should be allowed to do that in this case. No, thank you, Max. Secondly, I want to look briefly at the idea of, do the practicalities of the meat industry render it morally unacceptable to eat meat? And first we had Max's idea of global warming, the destruction of nature. Max didn't really actually have a problem with the idea of meat, just the idea that the industry happened to be so big that it was causing kind of problems on a global level. He kind of glazed over every other reason why CO2 emissions might occur, and he also ignored the fact that to keep feeding people, you would have to replace them with crops, which also carry problems in terms of fertilizers and having clear land to do it. We think that the actual practical solution to this problem is that we're giving cows too much space right now. They should be in a battery, and we should have that to fix this problem. Secondly, the idea that, hey guys, we've got like technology now, just eat some vegetables. Firstly, we think that there are cultural values to meat that we should allow people to maintain. Second of all, that's just not true. I mean, are you going to walk up to like the Maasai people and say, sorry guys, those cows actually have rights right now, but it's okay, thanks to 21st century tech. Oh wait, no, this is a third world country. You have no access to those things. Go eat that dirt over there. We don't think you can actually say that people can survive without meat just because we happen to live in a comfortable Western liberal democracy whereby we can be facilitated in doing so. We think that it is extremely important people have access to it. And it's dangerous to rely solely on vegetables. Ask anyone from 1840s Ireland. Also, we say at the end of the day, it's more important than anything that we choose, that we're allowed to have the right to do this. Circle of life, wheel of fortune, you know the rest. I move to oppose. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the speakers for engaging with what was an incredibly philosophical debate. I remember when I was in first year, we were given the motion that this has multiculturalism should never be a block on intervention. It was a really sexy night. So I thought this debate was fantastic for people who've only debated for 1 year, and I think we should all give them a round of applause. I'm now going to invite all the judges to retire to make a decision. And while they do so, we are going to resume the standing orders, which means basically that if anybody wants to speak from the floor, they're more than welcome to do. If anybody wants to make a point of information during the speeches between the two bells, for anybody who's been here, they're also more than welcome to do so. As it stands, we have 4 speakers making impromptu speeches. If anybody wants to make a speech, please put their name forward and I'll put them in. With that, I'm going to. Oh yeah, also the Maidens ball we take place in the Lilies, which you're all invited to. It's free in for this evening if you're with us. So with that, I'm going to invite the chair.
Thanks again to all the speakers for their speeches. They're fantastic. We're moving on to, as Jamie said, the floor part of the speech. Do stick around because all the we're going to come back and have the verdict hopefully within about 20 minutes, and you should be here for that. I call now upon Jamie Riley to speak for the proposition. Speeches are now 5 minutes long, and with a point of information allowed after the first minute before long.
Chairperson, adjudicators, maiden contestants, and ladies and gentlemen. We have all heard the various interesting arguments made by both sides. For example, the somewhat attitude of the opposition saying, well, I'm alright, Jack, screw you, get in my belly. And for the opposition with their rather bizarre claims, was rather amused about the talk about cave women and mention of a bee-healthy site. Anyway, but I'm going on proposition, mainly arbitrary point, really, but there is a way we can sort this out for both sides. We can be both kind to animals, abolish factories, and yet still have our cheeseburgers. My suggestion is grow meat in the lab. Now, this might rankle with some people, but if you hear me out, I can assure you it's a very economical, environmental, and most importantly, very ethical solution. There are 4 main advantages to this. First is far more healthy. When we can grow this meat, we could control the amount of fat, particularly such saturated fats like, say, omega-6, which is responsible for cholesterol, which has yes, a point of information.
Is it viable for the Maasai tribe that was previously mentioned for them to grow these kinds of meats in labs? Or would you think that maybe it's just a Western approach, perhaps, that's valid in itself?
Well, I'm more thinking for all those millions of chickens, of cows that are constantly slaughtered in those factories. As for the Maasai, well, that's their traditions. If they want to do that, that's fine. They're a third world country, so. Anyway. I'm shaking here. Anyways, first point, yeah. As I was saying, it was healthy. You can control the amounts of fats. Also, there are no hormones or antibiotics involved in this process. So basically, nothing bad about that. Second is
on that point, are you suggesting that ethically, I mean, you're pretty much only targeting Western liberal democracies that can actually access these labs to get this meat? In comparison, there are a huge amount of cultures across the world who require religious slaughter and actual live animals there for their particular traditions. Are you suggesting that just us, the liberal Western democracies, should use this lab?
Hey, I'm only taking this one step at a time. I'm focusing on the thing we can change. As for that, it's religious, and basically, sometimes that can cause a lot of trouble. I won't specify what,
religions, but you'll know them. Anyway, okay, I'm running very close to time here actually. So anyway, it's also ethical because when you're growing meat, there is no harm whatsoever. In fact, PETA have actually condoned this, and they're offering a $1 million prize to whoever can grow meat at a commercial level and is on the comparable level of our traditional meats.
On the
Yes.
point. So you. Oh, sorry.
No, it's over. Sorry. And the other 2 points are it's also economically viable. Less nitrates and methane are produced from growing meat because you don't have to worry about farts, burps, and shit. In fact, actually, if we do this, then the US will be producing 1.4 billion less tons of crap. And believe me, pardon the pun, that's a lot of bullshit. And finally, what was the name? Oh yeah, you cut out the middleman of having to give vegetables to the animals because basically you're growing them in like bioreactors, so that's the problem. Anyway, actually I had a lot more, but I kind of got a bit held up with conservation, so thank you for your
Thank you, Jamie, for your words. I now ask Oisin Brogan to speak for the opposition.
You've never spoken about public relations.
Well, in the film.
Have what is called Maidens' rights, which basically means that if you accept them, you don't have to take any points from the floor. If you reject them, we'll give you a round of applause and cheer you, but you then are obliged to take points in the same way that everybody else does. Would you like to take them?
I waive for my rights. Okay. Job 6:6. Can anything unsavory be eaten without salt? And is there any taste in the white of the egg? Now, this quote might be relevant to my speech, and we'll see how much time I actually have. So I'm going to be asking 3 major points, and it's going to be fairly metaphysical. I apologize to people who don't like that. I'm going to ask, what is life, justice, and rights? Then I'm going to ask, what is murder? And then I'm going to finally finish on, is meat murder? Which is the most relevant for the debate. So what is life, justice, and rights? And we had this conflict of whether life and justice is something that's inherent in our humanity, or whether it's something God-given, or whether it's something that we as society got together and created. And while the debate kind of dealt with, and the opposition dealt with rather well, whether justice and rights aren't inherent, and we came up with them. What is life? And I'm going to draw upon the rich resource here of webcomics. And I'm going to quote XKCD, for anyone who knows that. A girl has built a house of Lego bricks. And there she's there, she has the Lego bricks, and she's there with her father. And she breaks up the Lego bricks, and she puts them into the box. And her father asks her, where did the house go? And she said, it's in the box. Well, no, they're just Lego bricks. They can become anything. They can become spaceships, they can become a river, they can become an entire town. The structure of the house isn't in the box. The structure is just gone. It isn't anywhere. It doesn't exist anymore. In the same way, our sentient bodies, our life, is merely a structure of cells, merely a structure of molecules that happens to function in this way, that somehow managed to pull a trick and convince us that we existed. No, thank you, Finbar. And there's nothing with God, a mortal soul, or anything of that. We came up with that in the same way we came up with justice, and the same way we came up with rights. No, thank you, Anthony. So when you die, there's no immortal soul gone. So then we have to beg the question, what is murder? Because murder is based upon the fact that you're taking away an immortal soul, you're touching off this person's life. And we're saying that if you accept the first premise that there is no such thing as an immortal soul, then why is murder bad? What is murder? And we're saying that there's a twofold case in murder. In the same way that we kind of got together and made rights based, I'll take you in a minute here, but we made rights based upon the fact that if we have these rights, society and life would be better in general. In the same way, we don't allow murder because in general, life would be better for us. Yes, Kira.
Do
fear death?
This is a very important point because most people do fear death. But we're asking the reason we're coming, and I'm accepting this, that murder is still wrong. I'm getting to that. Death is still a bad thing. But it's not because your immortal soul is gone. It's because generally your potential to contribute to our society and make our society better has been taken away. And generally we accept that people do fear death and people grieve when people die. And those are the two reasons why we still don't like murder, because of the people you left behind and because of the loss of your potential. That's why we still don't like murder. We still don't like murder because of these two losses. So we come on to the third and final question. Is meat murder? Does meat fulfill these two categories? Is meat, when we kill a cow or a chicken, is there a loss of potential there? Is there a loss and there's some way that a cow can contribute to our society as a whole? Besides being eaten, there is none. The cow cannot contribute to our society in any way. Yes, Max, you tried to explain this earlier on.
Cow's milk isn't meat.
Okay, chickens, eggs, bunny rabbits. We still eat rabbits, okay? By better management of cows, we can keep the milk as well. So anyway, there's no loss of potential. Is there anyone left to grieve after that? Because while we might, you're out of time. While we might concede that in the proposition's case, as put quite well by Rion, in that cows can feel pain and the cows do accept and do realize that they are being led to the slaughterhouse. But do the other cows care? Do the other chickens worry about the fact that one of their number has suddenly not woken up? They don't. Chickens do not show remorse. Chickens do not show grief. They are purely self-interest things. And they purely don't care about anyone else. And because they don't have reason. So for that point, because they're selfish bastards, there's no reason why we can't kill chickens. So in the same way that we invented life, we invented this idea of justice, and we invented this idea of rights because, in general, if we have these self-created, purely fictional ideas, it makes our lives better. And why we accept that if we create this mythical idea of animal rights, it will make our lives less better because we like steak. Because why we still hate murder, because there's lots of potential and there are people left to grieve for you, and why meat does not fulfill those two categories of what murder is, I beg you to oppose.
We now move on to the final two speeches of the night, and we should hopefully have results shortly after that. Now calling Kieran Parker to speak for the proposition.
Time was when men were men, women were women, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri. And I say let's extend the right of life to small furry creatures, whether they be on Alpha Centauri or Grogan's farm. Okay, so I'm not going to claim that this speech is particularly, the things that haven't been said before, so it's going to be full of a reasonable amount of quotes. And then I'm going to talk about the kind of reasons why you might suggest that we protect the right to life and why they're all either, run with the proposition or mental. And then I'm going to give my own little idea. First off, a question. So anyone here do Leaving Cert English in the last while? Did you do John Montague, that poem about killing the pig? Yeah. It might have been called Killing the Pig. Do you eat pork? You sicken me. Okay. And so, okay, and we've also heard, a couple of things about how, over the course of time, through evolution and sheer grit, humanity has come to its current position of dominance, and therefore, we can, because of only through maintaining our power can we be safe, and this is why we can eat cows. So 2 quotes relevant to that. First off, if a cow got the chance, it'd eat you and everyone you care about. The second one is I don't know, at about the same level. It's from Lord Russell, which is, after countless ages when the earth produced harmless trilobites and butterflies, we have evolved to the state where we produce Neros and Genghis Khans. Fortunately, the earth will soon no longer be capable of supporting life, and peace will reign again. But okay, so some reasons why you might protect the right to life. Nothing. And some of them have been said earlier, and some of them I just kind of thought of. So first off, like the idea of kind of like intelligence and sentience. The idea of that something has these things, and therefore we say that they should be protected. Well, here's the question: how many grains of sand does it take to make a heap? If you start, not mine, you start taking grains away, at what point isn't it a heap? So here's the question. If our criterion for the right to life is sentience, there is a level which concludes some people who are, I suggest, either less intelligent or less sentient than some animals, like the higher apes or dolphins. And it's pretty convinced that's true. And so if that's your criterion, then, we pretty much have to let them in. If we let them in, where do we draw the line? Why not draw it all the way down to anything which... I was going to make another quote. Anything which has, another quote, which has, a brain, a consciousness, a central nervous system, or a good excuse for neither. Basically most animals. But the idea is humanity, and we've heard that. We've said that humanity should absolutely in of itself be the idea. And, we've heard that we anthropomorphize animals because, we're pathetic. And of course animals aren't the same as us. Well, the idea that animals can't feel things is based on, you being convenient to you to say that. It's convenient to me to say the opposite, but also based on some stuff, But anyway, whatever. Doesn't matter. What is humanity? Well, when it comes down to it, and science gives us a really good reason for what humanity is. And it's a species. Species, good, that's science. Science wouldn't lie to us. Well, what's a species? A species is things which can meaningfully have sex with each other. That's a great basis for morality. And then, I'll skip some stuff. The idea that, you get the right to life because you can contribute to society. Not necessarily wrong, just terrifying. My suggestion, why we should protect life? Because I'm scared of dying. I think most people here are scared of dying. And even if we don't know what it is, we're scared of not having it anymore. If we recognize it's something to be afraid of not having, then we recognize it's something that it's worth having, and anything that has it and can experience having it, we should protect that. For that reason, I suggest we propose it.
Thank you for your crazy words, Kieran. And now calling the final speaker of the night and for the opposition, Richard Kieran.
Right, to begin, I want an apology from some of the vegetarians for the deaths of the millions of microorganisms that you've killed this day alone, and the thousands of insects you've killed over your lifetime, some of them with malice aforethought. I mean, am I the only one who thinks to mourn the death of the thylacine or the aurochs? But no, this isn't a very sensible place to start my speech. But then I don't think the proposition's side is based on sense or logic either. You see, I think we've made a mistake with this whole thing. We're dealing with it from a moral level, but I don't like arguing things from a moral level when natural law is a superior thing. Okay, so I'm going to deal with it from a more scientific point of view. Now, it's possible to derive all your nutrients from vegetarianism in the same way that it's possible to make an artistic masterpiece using nothing but a red crayon. It's possible, but really most people would just be a lot better off with watercolors. Okay, the human body is not designed in a way to be able to get full efficiency from vegetarianism. The tooth structure is all wrong to start off with, and that's before we get to the whole intestinal tract, yeah.
Okay, I have 4 teeth which are designed for biting meat. Everything else is designed like for plants. Like you're just wrong on the one scientific fact you
Are you sure about that? These things here, these molars, premolars, they can grind meat pretty well, and I know because I've tried it many times. Incisors. Okay, the intestinal tract. Frankly, it's terrible for digesting plant matter because most of it's made of cellulose. And as we all know, the appendix, which was used to digest plants in some of our forebears, it's rather shriveled up and rather useless now. Ruminants, which are probably the best ones for eating plants, and they include cows, spend most of their lives eating grass, and that's with a 4-chambered stomach, which is full of bacteria which can break down cellulose. Now, okay, that's 600 kilograms compared to maybe 60, 70 kilograms of humans, but as much as I like eating, I wouldn't want to spend 2 hours a day doing it. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so that's a reason not to eat grass, but then you can eat fungus, you can eat grain, you can eat algae. You don't
Yes,
eat grass.
and then we get onto the ideas of plant proteins, which really are the most efficient ways to eat it. So if we impose a worldwide ban on meat eating, would lead to huge numbers of maladapted farm animals incapable of surviving properly with lack of human support. And, well, you can't really keep care of a 600-kilogram cow in your house. And to found a civilization with a vegetarian ethos would have left to huge numbers of the precursors to farm animals. I mentioned one of them, the aurochs, eating our crops and acting as pests, necessitating their eventual killing anyway. So what part of that isn't murder? Okay, a couple of points of information that I wanted to address. The inefficiencies of growing meat. Well, the reason that we're here debating it today is largely because of a massive explosion in population during the 1950s to 1970s because of something called the Green Revolution, which mainly involved vegetables. So, well, that's rather contributed to the 6.5 billion people there are today. If anybody really thinks that human technologies, they're advanced enough, I'd like to hear your points on why we're still using reciprocating engines in our cars. I don't know, but I beg you to oppose.
Thank you very much for all the speakers. We're now going to ask what way the House thinks that this motion is held. So can all those in favour of the motion, that is, this House believes meat is murder, please raise your hand, or say aye and raise your hand. Aye. And all those opposing the motion, please say aye. Being vegetarian, I'm definitely going to call that in favour of the ayes.
Either we can do it again with an ayes and nays, or we can do it again.
We can do it again.
Okay, we can talk. You can maybe explain that. Okay. Well, first of all, do ayes, and then we'll do nays.
We'll explain that later. Right. Sorry about that. We'll go again. Can all those in favour of this motion please say aye? Aye. That was much louder. Can all those in opposition to this motion please say nay? Nay! I'm going to have to use the nays just before we leave, just before we just move up to the reception upstairs and then from there on to Lily Bordello's up near Molesworth Street, where you go to get your pass report. So Molesworth Street, that's Molesworth Street there, that's the street just to make a very quick comment on the debate. Well, while we were having this debate over here, Mary Robinson was speaking over in the Davis Theatre, and she was speaking on the topic in conjunction with the Trinity Institute for the Trinity International Development Institute, and Oxfam on the topic of climate justice. And I think that was extremely relevant to the debate that we had. It was mentioned maybe less than enviro-fascists like myself might have wanted, but it was an absolutely brilliant debate. I think we have to give the speakers another round of applause for that. Two very quick thoughts of mine on the debate, and stemming from the Mary Robinson speaking on climate justice. We all know from the science that the facts on climate change are undeniable, that climate change is happening, and it's happening because of human activity. We also know in the justice element of that is it's happening because of the activities of humans in the developed world, historically and presently. But the impacts are going to be felt by those in the developing world, and that's where the justice element, I think, particularly comes into it. Yet at the same time, we also have an economic system which is based on the idea that we take individual responsibility. It's based on us being able to make choices, on us taking those choices, and we often don't. So with that, just one little stat which comes to mind is that 27% of Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture. 50% of them are irreducible, no matter if you lock up all the cows in a 6-yard box. They are irreversible on the current scale of agriculture because they come from the digestion system and all the rest. So there might be some room for technological improvement on the others. That's 27% of our emissions. 4.4 tonnes per capita in Ireland from agriculture per year. The sustainable amount is thought at somewhere around 1. And yet we have from agriculture 4.4. We have 4 times that just on agriculture. So bearing in mind the point that the economic system is one that allows you to make those choices, and is one that is meant to endow you with that choice, and meant to encourage you to make those choices, bearing in mind that climate change is a justice issue, and then taking on whatever you've heard from this debate, go out and actually do that. Go out and make those decisions, and then a final little plug actually. There's an action on climate change happening on Saturday the 5th of December. It's called The Wave. It'll be culminating from... It's being organised by Stop Climate Chaos Coalition. And I think whatever about your passions on this issue, I think it would be good if you could show your support. I think there's been a lot of very, very strong arguments based on why you maybe should not eat meat or why you should. But the climate change issue is a very important one. It is interlinked with this meat issue. So I'd encourage you to take on board what you've heard today and use it for your own personal choices. And if you want to come out and show your support for that protest, which is at 2 p.m. on Saturday 5th. Without any more ado, I'll hand you over to the chair.
Okay, so I've got 2 remarks. First of all, I just want to let everybody know what next week's debate is. It's a debate against Cambridge for the Student Economic Review. Every year we host this, and it is typically like the highlight of the session. Last year we had the world champions speak. Trinity typically bring out the best debaters, and it's always a fantastic debate. We hope to have Brian Lennon in the chair for it too, so it'll be on the same time next week. Secondly, if Kate Oliver is there, I'm just wondering if she could come up and make a short announcement.
On behalf of the Hist committee and all the freshers, we just wanted to say thank you very much to Hugh Duffy, who ran a competition that was distinctive not just for the chiseled features of its convener, but also for its inventive but debatable motions and the good humour and the efficiency and the fun for everyone. So I'd like to have a round of applause.
Thank you. I'm very touched by that, actually. Just to say a couple of thank yous. First of all, thank you to not just the 10 finalists today, who were undeniably awesome, I think, but we'll include the round of applause in the later round of applause at the end of this very long sentence. But also to absolutely everyone who took part in the Maidens. I wasn't so sure about this whole debating thing when I started in college. But I did this competition, and I got involved with it, and I do think that even if you only come along for one debate, even if you only get up to the second round or whatever, public speaking and getting involved in political issues and just thinking about things like this that you might never have asked yourself is incredibly important. I saw almost all of the debates in this competition. There were an awful lot of them, 100 people took part in all. They were all absolutely fantastic. So to everyone here who did take part in the Maidens, sincerely well done, and we hope that you come along to more debates in the Hist, that you get up and you make your opinions known and that you convince everyone. So thank you to all of you. And just like the second thank you is, I mean, I'm the person standing up here making the speech and the person whose name is on the sheet, but really, proportionately speaking, I contributed very little to the running of this competition compared to the rest of the committee of the Hist and to previous members of committee and just to ordinary members of the society, people like you. Next year you could help run a Maidens competition, who came out and judged at all hours of the morning and afternoon, who helped set up rooms, who helped set up the fantastic debate we've got here and all this stuff, and the fantastic reception we have upstairs. So on that note, thank you to all of you, and let's go get drunk.
Upstairs, the reception, I call this meeting to a close.
Fantastic. Fantastic, well done. Really good.
Good luck all. Yeah!
You got caught up in the handshake.
I think there's people.
I was in the building.
Alright. Well, cheers anyway.
Same as last time. I actually fell asleep in that room and woke up in